Whether you're a collector, investor, player, or perhaps even a business owner, you're going to eventually need to ship your cards out. And doing that in the most cost efficient way is something that we can help you with, having shipped nearly 1 million cards ourselves. So let's dive in. One of the caveats is the more you ship, the cheaper you can get your shipping materials. So there's going to be two perspectives of this today in terms of cost. We're going to show you how we look at it and what we're doing in terms of our velocity. However, I'm also going to have links for any of you that are maybe just shipping a couple orders a month. So check out the description below. Each of the products I show you here today will be linked. Now, to get us started, what we have here is essentially the cardboard gold. This is going to be the cheapest way to go, and you're typically buying in cases. So there's going to be tens or thousands of different products in that respective case. We have our card sleeves, essentially known as your penny sleeve. We have the semi-rigid, which we'll talk about why we chose this over the traditional top loader. And then, of course, we have the PSA graded sleeve, non-logo, by the way. In addition to that, we have our 4x7 envelope with a self-seal. We have our bubble mailers, and we have a 6x8 self-seal hard envelope. Lastly, to top it all off, we have our 4x7x2 box that will show you what these use cases are for each one of these products. Now, in all of our orders, we're going to be including some type of a packing list, and that typically has our social media right here so they can quickly and easily jump right to one of the platforms of their choice. We have our branding, and of course, just a little bit of information letting them know what is actually in the package itself. Having ordered thousands of orders at a single time and receiving those in and not having packing list, and of course the address being sent from doesn't match the actual seller from TCG Player or eBay, it gets very difficult to track your orders. So having some way to understand what's actually in the package and who sent it to you will be appreciated by many of the customers. Now, let's start off with perhaps the easiest one. And this is the one that most of us are going to see on the day-to-day basis when we're shipping below 8 cards. I say 8 cards because there is a reason we choose that number and how we package this, keeping the cost as cheap as possible. So we're going to use 2 in this example, but I'll also showcase how this works out when it's up to 8 and even over 8. Now, these cards are already sleeved, but we typically would slide them into a quick penny sleeve just very quickly, making sure each card is protected. Now, when they're of lower value and perhaps sets of 4 for playability and they're non-hollows, I'll definitely just put some of those into a single sleeve, up to maybe 10 in a single sleeve. Again, only when they're non-hollow, because the hollows will get scratched sometimes if you do that. So we tend not to do that with hollows or better. Now, we do quickly just line those up, so making sure that the cards are just evenly aligned within the penny sleeves, and we slide that right inside of the semi-rigid. So the semi-rigid is chosen by the choice that it actually is flexible. So as you're moving through the shipping process in USPS, these envelopes are flying at a large speed. I don't know the exact speed, but I'm sure it's fast. And you don't want to have them so rigid that they don't go through the machine. So before we continue, there's a couple of restrictions when you're keeping the cost low for this current packing process, and that's defined by the USPS standards. It has to be 7 inches or below by 11 inches. And that's going to be roughly, there's give or take, I think a half or a quarter inch. And then there's also a depth of about 1/4 of an inch. And that keeps all of those envelopes flying through the machines at high speeds and ensuring that they don't get stuck, jammed, and of course, slow down the entire process. If you try to go beyond that, they will often send back to you that package and you're going to have to pay for your shipping cost again. It's not worth it, so try to find that right balance and ensure you stick within those parameters. It's going to save you a world of headaches. All right, so jumping back in, we got our cards in the semi-rigid, and as we said, that semi-rigid is the reason that we do this, so that it can stay flexible as it goes into the envelope. Now we also add this happens to be a already folded and sealed PSA graded slab, we actually use these as two purposes. And that's going to be one of the themes of today. It's going to be make sure you buy products you can use for multiple reasons, and that way you can buy them in larger quantities and get the cheaper price. So we slide these right in to that actual PSA sleeve and seal it just as you would expect over the top. Now, one of the things that our good friends like Dan Catch-em-all Collectibles and many others hate, including myself, is the tape. You don't need to have tape on these. And that's one of the beautiful things about the semi-rigid as well. Once you have your cards in the semi-rigid, they don't slide out like they do on a top loader. So not only does it give you the flexibility, but it better holds the cards in place and you don't have to worry about adding tape. And of course, now the sleeve keeps it from falling out. In the event that it did get moved around, it doesn't actually come out of the semi-rigid and still stays protected. Now, as we said before, we have that packing list here. I've blacked out some of the information from one of our customers, and we would typically just lay this right in the middle, fold it in halves around the card. This keeps it perfectly centered within the respective envelope, and then we fold it on each side just very quickly. Now, I'm slowing down for this process to kind of show you how we do it, but we would typically have this done at a very high speed. Then we would take our envelope. In this case, that 5x7 we showed you earlier, this fits perfectly on each side. Now, we did keep this so that when the customer pulls this out, they see our logo, they see the order number, the date, they know exactly what they're getting. And as soon as they open this up and flip it over, now they have their products, social media, everything's presented nice and easy. Now, I will be adding business cards to these. I don't have any at the moment, so I typically would also add a business card inside of this, but for now we don't have one. Take that off and seal it. Now, one of the things I stopped doing was adding the actual branding logo on this as a sticker because it had Pokemon in the name, it showed a logo, and it gave reason for ill intentions in delivery. So we had some packages missing. That started to grow as our orders grew. So we took that off and tried to keep things as simple as possible. So now we just actually, once we've pulled this off and closed the envelope, we would have fixed the 4x6 shipping label to the back so that it exactly fits over this. And then on the back end, there's actually nothing. So if somebody was going to try to tamper with this, they'd have to rip off the label, tear open the seal, and it'll be very evident that it's been tampered with. So this gives us a pretty secure way, and we've had a lot less issues getting our packages delivered when we go with this method. Now, using that approach and kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, this will help you up to 8 cards. We can put up to 8 cards in a single semi-rigid, just making sure they're well aligned as we showed you before, and sliding those in without any damage. Again, we've shipped nearly 1 million cards and had 0 issues with up to 8 cards being into a single semi-rigid. Now, the only difference with this, when we look at it for up to 16 cards, so 2 semi-rigids, is we would take that and still keep it as an eBay envelope or perhaps your orange mailer or pirate ship, whichever platform you prefer to use to print your shipping labels. Again, the links for those are down below. The only difference really is making sure you keep it slim enough. Again, remember, you have to be a width or a depth of about 1/4 of an inch. If you start to go beyond that and you stack, for example, multiple top loaders or 50 cards in a single envelope, they're going to send it back to you. So be careful with that. And let me quickly show you how we look at this from the perspective of maybe up to 16 cards. So using that same process that we had before, we would have already put our cards, up to 8 cards in a single semi-rigid, each one of those penny sleeved or perhaps more than one in a single sleeve if they're non-hollows and lower value. And then we would actually, instead of folding it in the middle, we would simply actually fold it slightly with a lip at the bottom, slide in each one of our semi-rigids in the middle, and then fold it over and then have a fold on each side. So that's really the only difference. It's a little bit wider and it stays a little bit longer. We would slide that into our 6x8 envelope, and these are again self-seal, and these are a little bit more rigid as well, but not so rigid they don't go through the eBay letter or USPS restrictions. Seal that up, peel this off, and boom, and you keep this nice and thin. It stays within that 1/4 of an inch depth that we talked about, and I've had maybe only 1 or 2 of these have an issue. And that's honestly when I tried to push the bounds, add a few more cards in. One of the things I forgot to mention is going to be the weight. Not only is the length and the width as well as the depth one of the key restrictions on whether you can use these methods or not, but it's also the weight. You have to be 3 ounces or below. Over 3 ounces, yeah, you can nudge it a little bit, have 1 or 2 extra cards and maybe be 3.2, 3.5. But once you start pushing those boundaries, they will catch it. They're going to send it back to you, and then they're going to say insufficient postage. So make sure it saves you time, it saves the customer time, it saves you money. Just follow the rules, and you're going to be a lot happier that you did. Now, one last perspective when we talk about raw cards is the value. Now, these value of cards are going to be in an envelope only when they're below $50 in my opinion. Now, recently, TCG Player has moved that boundary to around $20 when they want you to have tracking. And obviously, these envelopes don't have proper tracking. Even the eBay envelopes with tracking doesn't always work as you would expect it to. So for us, when it's $50 or below, we still tend to use that envelope process. However, above that, we actually move more to the process that follows what we do for graded cards that are sub $1,000. So with that in mind, let's jump into now a graded card process. Here we have ourselves a graded card. This is one of the Kingdras from that collection box of Shrouded Fable. This card's moving very quickly, by the way. And just as we did before, we would take this graded card, making sure that we put it inside of a sleeve. We always put our cards inside of a sleeve. In this case, I'm going to reuse the same one we had before. Just slide that right into that PSA sleeve, seal that up. Okay. From there, we then add it into the bubble mailer. Now, one of the things that we don't typically do is we don't ship it in just the bubble mailer itself. Now, whether we use the 6x8 envelope or we use the box depends on the value of the card. Now, obviously, the bubble mailer will be sealed, and if it's typically below $50 or around $50, sometimes up to $100, we will actually just place this inside of the 6x8. Peel a label, seal it, and then put the 4x6 shipping label on the front. Now, moving it up one level, say that graded card or perhaps even that raw card is going to be above $100. We will then ship that in the 5x7x2 boxes that we showed earlier. And in this case, it's exactly the same. We would seal it inside with that respective semi-rigid or the graded card itself, put it inside of the bubble mailer, seal that up, place that inside of this box, and you can see here that we have a bit of a fold. And the reason that's good is because it actually keeps it from moving around too much and even gives room and depth that if there was a puncture or perhaps something heavy came on top of it, it would still give it protection and ensure that it gets there as safely as it possibly can. Again, seal that up, put the shipping label right on top. And the only thing that we would add to this is going to be that we might add an additional shipping label here just to seal over this, some additional packing tape, or even a tamper-proof seal if you wanted to add 1 or so of those over the edge just to make sure that nobody opens this while it's in transit. Now, while all of this looks pretty simple and easy, and once you've done it a few times, it really is. It ensures that you know exactly how you're going to package up to certain numbers of cards and which type of box, and you can ensure you have those materials easily and readily available to you as you're processing your orders. But we're not done here. Let's dive into the numbers and make sure this all makes sense. So looking at the numbers, we're showing at first here the raw card shipping prices. Now, one of the things you'll notice right away is that we're ordering these in large quantity. And as I mentioned to you in the beginning, this is because we're shipping lots of orders each and every day. I'm going to have links as well, not just for the cardboard gold, which is going to be where you go once you want to have your orders in mass or your shipping materials in mass. However, when you're ordering at a smaller quantity, we're going to have those links for the Amazon as well, so you have the corresponding products depending on where you are in your shipping journey. Now for us, we have envelopes at 200 each in a box. We also then have cases of our graded card sleeves, our penny sleeves, and of course the semi-rigids, with the overall cost of the eBay shipping label, which is 69 cents. But again, don't forget that if you're shipping outside of eBay, you still need to get cheaper shipping. Don't go to USPS and ask them to ship your products. This is going to be the most expensive way for you to do it, and it's going to take a lot of the profit margins out of the product that you're selling. So jumping back into the numbers, remember that it's not just about the eBay shipping label, but also if you're going to ship maybe with TCG Player or with your own Shopify or Wix store, you need to have a good way. And Shopify and Wix, as a prime example, they don't have the best prices when you're shipping raw cards and envelopes. You want to go to something like Pirate Ship or perhaps even Orange Mailer. They are slightly higher than what we see with eBay. Obviously, eBay does massive amounts of orders every single day, so their pricing is a little bit better. But I think as of the recording today, it's around 73 cents for a label, 1 ounce or below, and I think $1.29 up to 3 ounces. And that's cheaper than what you're going to pay if you go to USPS directly, as well as trying to buy that same label for an envelope via your Shopify or Wix store. As you can see, we spent some initial money on getting all the supplies in, so $314 to get this mass amount of supplies, with of course the postage being 1 per order. Now, but the overall cost is 90 cents. So just slightly over about 20 cents from the original eBay label itself in this example. And so making sure you understand your shipping cost and you have that either baked into the price, you have your shipping costs set accordingly, whether it be on eBay or TCG Player or your own store, and you pass that along and don't lose money with your shipping costs. So understanding this is a key. Now switching gears slightly, but now over to the cost on the graded card or perhaps even the high-end raw card side, we can see that we have our shipping costs with now USPS ground. This is going to give us a true tracking number, and I think it's insurance up to about $250 by default. Now anything above that, make sure you add in your tracking with signature, and then that's going to also add another $3 or $4. But again, if the value is above $250, it may be worth it to you to do so. Also now taking into account our packing slip, which we did leave off when we talked about raw cards, so make sure you go back and add 1 penny to that overall cost. We forgot to add that. We'll have the graded card sleeve, the bubble mailer, and again, the flat white cardboard envelope, but that's that 6x8 envelope that we saw. Now again, that doesn't include the box. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but overall your cost is going to be about $5.74 to ship that graded card or high-end raw card. Now if you did want to use that 5x7x2 box, that does cost an extra 20 cents, so you can just basically replace this 27 cents with about 47 cents. Don't forget that all the links for these products and everything we've shown here today is in the description below. They are affiliate links. They do help the channel out if you do happen to need those for your shipping needs, but however, they don't cost you anything extra and we would greatly appreciate it. Now, there's other areas of shipping that we're going to get into later, perhaps jumbo cards, sealed booster boxes, ETBs. These are things we'll save for another video in order to keep this short, sweet, and concise, but we hope that you found this interesting, insightful, and perhaps even a little bit fun. As always, if you're interested in selling your cards with us, feel free to reach out in the description below, support@PokemonWonder.com, and we're happy to help you with your consignments or perhaps even your buyouts. Stay tuned for more great videos around business content and how you can make the most of your time in your hobby while having fun doing it. As always, we appreciate all of you. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.